You guys know I'm not a big fan of science-based lifting, right? But that doesn't mean I necessarily agree with every single criticism of them. Some of these criticisms are downright wrong, and by far the worst offender here is that science-based lifters overcomplicate everything. That is not only not true, it's actually the exact opposite of true. Science-based lifters actually tend to oversimplify training, and that's why I'm not a fan of it. I like sophistication in training. Now, there's obviously some complexity involved in the science-based space, but it is in the right places. It's not in the exercise selection, the execution. That stuff is not complex or sophisticated in most cases with them. There's a lot of complexity involved in running and interpreting studies, of course, but that actually has the effect of reducing the amount of complexity and sophistication in the methods that science-based lifters recommend because it limits the amount of information that they have available that meets the standards they insist on, right? So at best, they're sacrificing breadth of knowledge for an unnecessary and even counterproductive in some cases standard of evidence, and at worst, they're essentially just using scientism as marketing for their mediocre programs, and the latter case I think is far more common, or at least gets more attention in the algorithm. Before I get into the theoretical stuff about science, let me lead with a concrete example and some trash talking because that's more fun and entertaining and will hopefully get you guys invested in the rest of the video. So to lead, I'm going to respond to a brief clip from Basement Bodybuilding's recent video on science-based training.
Look at the current landscape of the fitness industry with the absolute hyper-focus and obsession on the stretch. People are promoting the stretch without realizing what is being sacrificed in order to get the stretch because they're tunnel-visioned on that one variable. And I have nothing wrong with seeking ways to incorporate training variables or methods that science seems to be revealing as important, but we have to remember that there will be other variables that we simultaneously don't understand as much or that we forget about, or even variables that we aren't even aware of for various reasons. Think about the stretch, for example. Who cared about it 10 plus years ago? Now everyone's obsessing over it.
All right, so that's a pretty common take, right? These science-based lifters, they're obsessed with the stretch. But with all due respect to Basement Bodybuilding and, the rest of his video is very good. This is not an attack on him. That take is completely wrong. The science-based guys aren't obsessed with stretch-based training at all. They don't give a damn about it. How do I know? Because real recognize real, and they're looking mighty unfamiliar. I am actually obsessed with stretch-based training. I put a ton of time, energy, experimentation, into figuring out how to make stretch-based exercises as effective as possible for both hypertrophy and mobility, right? So take my recent video criticizing Milo Wolf's recommendation to ditch leg extensions in favor of reverse Nordics as an example. So his video was mostly just talking about research on the stretch, with a very cursory, incomplete, arguably dangerous demonstration of reverse Nordics just thrown in at the very end as an afterthought. Like super simplistic, right? Meanwhile, my response video, which of course he ignored, gave detailed recommendations on exactly how to scale and use reverse Nordics so as to actually get benefit out of them instead of just, wrecking your knees, which is honestly the likely outcome of someone following Milo's video, right? I actually try to show you how to use these, and there's a lot of complexity in making this an exercise you can actually use effectively, right? And that's because I actually care about stretch-based training enough to actually get into the details of it, right? And, let's be real here, I'm not only, vastly better at reverse Nordics than Milo is, I can actually, guide people on how to implement them effectively because I've done the research and worked out all those details that, he's not obsessed enough to care about, right? And by the way, sissy squats are probably a better choice for that same kind of role in hypertrophy in most cases, just, scale in with a band. But anyway, that's beside the point. Anyway, while we're on the subject of, stretch-based training and people not being obsessed with it at all, so Milo called pullovers the best exercise for lats. That was his word. I think he said it was the overall best exercise for lats.
The single best exercise for lat growth, in my opinion, is the dumbbell pullover.
And that's, of course, because his interest is in using the studies to make bold claims to get him traction in the algorithm, right? However, when Kasim Hansen from N1 called him to defend that claim, it's nowhere to be found. Didn't return calls, The mail returned address not found, return to sender, right? Nowhere to be found. All right, he hid from that debate, and if you watch him do pullovers, you'll understand why you'll understand why he was afraid to debate on them. He's never actually bothered to try to figure out how to perform pullovers in a manner that's effective for lats. If you watch him do them, he's actually using the same just lying flat on a bench technique that was actually used in the study that found very low activation for lats in EMG studies, right? That technique actually does straight up suck for lats. He coped about how EMG studies aren't good, and that's true in some cases, but the reality is the technique that they were using in that study and that he also uses actually is just not very good for lats, right? Meanwhile, because I'm actually interested in exploring the technique and making sure it works as well as possible, I was very confident in showing up to defend the pullover as a good back exercise. Not that I made the claim that pullovers are the best lat exercise, because I have integrity and you can't really make the case that any exercise is the single best lat exercise. They all have pros and cons, and you're going to have better overall development if you incorporate a wide assortment, not just one, right? But I did defend the point that they absolutely can be effective for lats if and only if performed correctly for that purpose. And by the way, it ended up not being as much of a debate anyway, because it ended up being that teres majors are the prime mover, but I do make the case that they can still be effective for lats if you use one of the techniques that I use that actually biases towards them, like hanging off the bench, or to a certain extent the cross bench pullover technique. Anything with spinal extension will get the lats more involved than just lying on a bench like it's a bench press, right? But anyway, right? So speaking on the subject of just being obsessed with stretch-based training, which is what I am and what the science-based guys are not. I kind of re-pioneered the Jefferson curl as a hypertrophy exercise, right? It was just seen as a light mobility exercise before, but I experimented with pushing it into the hypertrophy roll, which, by the way, it turned out that's exactly how the silver era bodybuilders used to use it back in the day. We just had a little bit of a naming issue where we kind of forgot about it because they called it a stiff leg deadlift back in the day. I've got a whole video up on that if you're interested. I'll try to put it in the caption or whatever. But anyway, it seems like an obvious direction to explore if you actually care about stretch-based training. If you're obsessed with it, just because it's such a good stretch and it's a weighted stretch, it would make sense to use that as a hypertrophy exercise, right? But if you just care about the stretch in the sense that it's a way to sell milquetoast programs to noobs who need the stamp of scientism to believe that a program will actually work because they don't actually believe in their own ability to execute any program, then of course you don't want to explore a scary exercise like that because it's not going to sell to that audience, right? Yeah, no, science-based lifters don't do anything like that. Their obsession with the stretch just means, in practice, doing the bottom half of standard exercises, length and partials. Here's a really obvious example of their complete failure to have even the slightest curiosity about stretch-based training, right? So, if you wanted to apply stretch-based training to the calves, how would you do that? There's an obvious answer, right? Donkey calf raises. Okay? And they're not as common anymore as they used to be in the golden era, but it's not like it's some kind of obscure exercise from the 1800s. Anyone who's reasonably knowledgeable about bodybuilding should know what a donkey calf raise is. But not one of these science-based guys actually recommends them to get a better stretch, right? They just recommend doing, only the bottom half of a standing calf raise because that's all they have scientific data on, right? the studies are, it really is like that old story of the drunk guy searching for his keys under a streetlight, and a fellow comes by and asks him, what are you doing? I'm searching for my keys. Oh, okay, did you drop them here? Well, no, I dropped them over there. So why aren't you searching over there? Well, because it's dark over there, I can't see, so I'm searching here where the light is, right? That's how these guys treat studies, right? So they just, instead of actually finding a calf variation that actually gets a better stretch, they do the bottom half of a standard calf raise because that's all that they've studied, right? So they give that ridiculously simplistic advice for calves, and then they tell you that if your calves don't grow, it's because of genetics, right? Meanwhile, not only did I figure out how to rig up donkey calf raises using Smith machines, straps, weight belt, whatever, the setup that I use at home. I also came up with a much better stretch promoting substitute for that seated calf raise that the science-based guys say sucks according to their studies, right? But don't do anything to fix. They don't do anything to fix it. I did, right? And by the way, I put up a workout on the Again Brew Method app that contains video tutorials on how to set up those exercises. It's just like a one-off workout that I made as an accessory program for my programs on there. It's completely free. You don't have to pay subscription to the app or anything. You just download the app and you can get it on there. It's called Yes, Your Calves Can Actually Grow. That's actually the name because I thought it was funny. But yeah, just if you want to see what I'm talking about, you can get that for free. No payment of any sort required there. Anyway, you guys get the idea though. Actually being obsessed with stretch-based training, means figuring out how to implement it effectively in training. Not talking about how some study on like 10 novice undergrads means you're right? As a result, unlike these guys, I can actually show you visible muscular gains like on my body, like calves that we talked about, back, etc., that I've actually achieved via stretch-based training. And these guys cannot show you the same thing, right? Maybe I just have a better tanning company than Mike Israel. Wasn't that the excuse? But anyway, because I actually care about stretch-based training, not only do I have good development to show for it, I actually kind of understand the importance of other modalities like shortened position training that these guys throw out because they don't have studies showing that it does something, right? Okay, so maybe it's not as good for specifically in and of itself producing hypertrophy, but it has value, right? So for example, if you want to get good at the reverse Nordics and sissy squats the way that I am and they're not, I guess they wouldn't know because they're not that good at them and I am, you'll understand the importance of a shortened movement for a warm-up, right? I use Spanish squats, but you could even use the leg extensions that Milo wants you to throw out, right? And because I've done the work to actually figure out how to use these in practice sustainably without wrecking your knees and while making lots of gains, and I can show you the rec film gains. If I wasn't wearing jeans, I could show you the rec film. I've already put it up on a previous video. Anyway, what was I saying? Right. Anyway, yeah. So you need a shortened position movement to actually get good at that stuff. The stretch position training, right? And for another example, if you want to get good at something like a Jefferson curl, if you want to be able to actually, use the range that you're opening up, like actively move into it and just use the movement effectively and safely in training and just make range progress with it, you're going to need shortened position training on the opposite end of the equation, something like an L-sit, right? To actually be able to actively move into that range you're opening up, right? Otherwise, it's not useful. This might be why my stretch-based training that I'm actually obsessed with is actually leading to mobility gains, increased range of motion, whereas, folks like Dr. Mike, who are allegedly obsessed with a stretch, still move like, a 1950s stereotype of a robot. Now, speaking of mobility, if you do increase your range of motion through stretch-based training, you're going to want clothing with mobility to match, so make sure to take advantage of Barbell Apparel's Black Friday sale. It's going on now through Monday. So get a pair of the best jeans in the market. You guys know I wouldn't just say that. I've been wearing them for years before I ever thought about being a fitness influencer, for only $99. Now, that may not sound that cheap, but compare them to any other jeans that you can get for that price. Jeans aren't cheap as they used to be. I know I grew up in the 90s, so things have all gotten more expensive, but that's just the way things are. And just compare them to any other jeans you can get at that price, or really any price. That money's going to go a long way just because they're so durable. They're going to last you, and they're just very, very comfortable. And they've also got chinos, tactical pants, whatever, if that's more your style. And everything else is 20% off, like this shirt. So as you can see, it fits Jack physiques really nicely. Oh, shit. Okay, that's not the shirt. I think my camera's making my arms look bigger than they are. Damn, I look like fucking one of these natty guys out here. I have been doing the preacher curls and all that good stuff, but my arms aren't really this big. I think the camera's just making them look kind of better for whatever reason. I think maybe the bottom, I think it's like the bottom, I don't know, maybe it's like the angle or something. The bottom half is like, that looks pretty sick though, right? Okay, I look like a fucking bodybuilder here, right? Look like one of these natties. I'm gonna make this my thumbnail, I think. God damn. Alright. That's cool. Dude, look. Is this what it would be like to have big arms? That looks sick, dude. I'm gonna go train arms tomorrow. Anyway, shit, sorry guys. Where was I? Yeah, that was kind of a long rant, and then we kind of got completely sidetracked. But that's a good sidetrack. I'm happy with that. I hope you guys don't mind. Anyway, it illustrates the point that somebody obsessed with a particular training modality is actually going to go into way more detail than these science-based folks do. You're going to go out and run experiments on yourself, your clients, your friends, your dog, whatever. I don't have a dog. I haven't run experiments on dogs. You probably shouldn't run experiments on dogs. Whatever. You get the idea. You're going to be like running experiments in practice, not like publishing stuff, right? on that note, like, do you have any idea how long it takes just to run a study and get it published? Like, months and months and months if you're lucky, just to get a tiny little bit more evidence about the effects of one simple variable. And I want to emphasize little here because, like, actually applying the standards of pretty much any other real scientific field to these half-assed, like, N equals 11 studies that they do in exercise science, it just really does not count as much of any more information in any real serious field, to be honest with you. So you're going to be extremely limited in the number of questions that you can actually provide, even the most tentative answers to actually researching things that way. And even when you do get something that looks like an answer, you still have a ton of questions about, external validity. Does this actually apply to trained lifters? Okay, well, what if we modified the technique a little bit? Just so many questions that are still unanswered about it. And that ultimately, that difficulty in getting actual answers that way leads to science-based training actually being very simplistic and dumbed down, because there's just a very limited number of parameters that they actually have good data on. So they kind of get tunnel vision, and they end up like that guy who treats every problem like a nail because he only has a hammer, right? Meanwhile, lifters who use experiential knowledge just have a lot more breadth to go on, so they can actually get a lot more sophisticated in their approach because they just have an efficient way to go out and get answers, right? Okay, so I've bashed on the science-based approach a lot, right? But if it sucks so much, why do people still hold it in such high regard? Why do they put it up on a pedestal as something with all this, authority and value? Well, because it works really, really well in other fields. Probably the best, or at least most applicable example here, most, direct comparison, I think, is medicine, right? You would definitely not want to use an experimental, like, bro approach in medicine, just like trying out random medications and chemicals and stuff on yourself and your clients to see what they do, right? That would probably not end especially well for you, so you don't do that. That's why we don't do that, right? Because the stakes are so high in medicine, finding something that, that could work just means saving the lives of millions of people, but on the other hand, screwing up could mean ruining or even, ending the lives of millions of people, right? You really need to make sure that you get the right answer and, dot your I's, cross your T's, go through all the steps, check all the boxes, do everything the right way, right? Just to make sure that you get the right answer, or as close as we possibly can get to the right answer. But also, because the stakes are so high there, you actually have the funding and resources necessary to actually do that approach correctly, with thousands of people, not 10, controlling for every possible variable, not winging it and saying, like, trust me, bro, whenever it's inconvenient for you to follow basic scientific procedure, like double blinding your study, as in the case of that study by Brad Schoenfeld, where he didn't actually do double blind and said, oh yeah, you can trust me, bro, right? So anyway, in exercise science, the stakes are not high, okay? We're not trying to find the cure for some, life-threatening disease that we currently have no idea whatsoever how to treat, right? We already more or less know how to train very effectively for most outcomes just through experience and tradition, right? So the best possible outcome of a robust, fully developed exercise science would just be an incremental improvement on what we already have, right? But to actually do that would still take a similar level of resources to actual medical research, because ultimately we're still dealing with the massive complexity of the human body. It would be in many ways just as complex as medical research. It's just that the stakes are just so much lower, The resources necessary to do that are just absolutely not there right now, and they're not there by an incredibly large margin, Earlier I used the phrase, researchers are half-assing it, because, that's the common saying, right? But in reality, exercise scientists are actually a lot closer to like 1% assing their field, because they just don't have even a fraction of the resources that would be necessary to actually do it correctly, right? And realistically, I just don't think it would ever make sense for our society to give them those resources unless we get to some kind of, Star Trek level, like post-scarcity utopia. Until we get to that point, which doesn't seem likely right now, the juice is just not worth the squeeze of actually devoting that much resources to fully developed exercise science, okay? Okay, so some people might say, okay, well then, isn't science still the best tool we have available, even though it doesn't have as many resources as we would like? No. So most people would agree that an AR-15 is a better weapon than a bow, right? But if you don't have any 5.56 or .223 ammunition or any way to get some, you'd be a whole lot better off practicing with a bow, would you not? I mean, you can find some straight sticks, sharp stones, feathers, make some arrows, practice, figure out how to make that stuff work, and get really good with that tool, and that's going to serve you a lot better than something that could theoretically be superior, but you just don't have the necessary resources to use, right? Now, that being said, kind of continuing that little analogy, though, that only matters if you actually care about being able to produce that desired outcome in physical space, right? If you're only concerned about the psychological impact of the tool you're carrying, how people perceive you, not your actual ability to produce results, you could probably get a lot of mileage out of an empty AR, right? Just throwing a mag so no one can tell it's empty. And, it might be just as good as a full one for, getting people to give you money and respect, just as long as no one calls your bluff, right? And that's kind of how the science-based crew use science, right? They just kind of wave it around to get people to treat them as an authority figure and buy their apps, and just trusting that most people won't have the education to know that it's actually empty. Now, to be fair, not all science-based folks are like that. Some of them are much better about being honest, communicating the limitations of research, but as a result, those are typically much, much lower profile than the particular clique that I'm criticizing here, just because that kind of approach isn't exciting, it doesn't sell as well. Then you've got others like Jeff Nippard, who are like nominally science-based, but are actually kind of like closet bros who actually do give a lot of importance to experience, right? And I'm not saying that as an attack on Jeff. His advice is generally much better than theirs is. He's honest, he's confident enough to actually engage with criticism instead of running and hiding from it like they do, which, unfortunately doesn't always work out well for him, but I think it's admirable, right? And his physique is certainly vastly, vastly better, right? He's jacked enough that he could say, just trust me, bro, I have big arms, right? So I don't know why he has to do the science-based thing, but either way, it's very clear that he doesn't lean on it for status the way that some others do, right? And I should also quickly point out that there's a difference between science-based, meaning like basing training decisions, on published studies, and then also biomechanics. There's a difference between those two, right? Biomechanics is kind of just figuring out how the body works, right? Now, there's some overlap, but biomechanics guys, at least some of them, are just as dismissive of science-based as I am. And the best in that field are actually very good at figuring out things a lot more efficiently without all that red tape from like publishing studies, right? Now, there are definitely some issues with biomechanics too, but that's a topic for another day. Anyway, point being, basing training on studies doesn't increase its complexity. It actually impairs the ability to develop a sophisticated and nuanced understanding based on experience. That's the primary point of this video. I hope you guys found that interesting, and if you do and you want to support this channel, or honestly, if you just want to get good, complex, nuanced, experience-based training, check out the Ganbrew Method app. It's on Black Friday sale right now, 50% off membership. You can find my programs, Silver Space Marine, a more advanced, like intermediate to advanced program that will get you absolutely yoked. Don't be the only guy in your friend group that doesn't have massive traps. Go ahead and pick that up. Or if you're looking for something more beginner oriented, I've also got Bronze Era Basics on there, a 3-day-a-week full body program that's still got as much complexity and nuance as is reasonable for somebody at that stage. It'll give you a little bit more of a sophisticated intro to your lifting journey without overwhelming you with complexity. And if you don't like subscriptions, those are both available as a one-time purchase as well. So check that out. Get a while it's on sale if you're interested and you want to support this channel. But like I said, I don't want you to buy something just because you want to give me money. I mean, if you could just mail me. Well, nah, I'm not going to give you my address. Whatever. I mean, I guess I could set up. You guys get the point. Like, I want you to buy it because you think it's going to benefit you, not because you just want to help me. But anyway, yeah, go check that out. And if you want to. The additional benefit of the membership, which you can get for 50% off right now, is just that there's so many other programs you can derive value from. We're talking about mobility and stretch here. Well, there's a ton of good mobility programs. Not only can you actually get some hypertrophy off of some of that stretching, like one of the coaches who offers a program on there, my coach Lucas Hardy. I mean, if you look at him, he doesn't post physique a whole lot. Cause I don't know why, but if you look at his back, dude, he's got detail. Like, he's got muscles developed that you don't normally see on people, right? So definitely training throughout that whole range works. And I mean, the science-based guys will tell you that, but they don't live it. They don't actually do it like he does. So, anyway, point being, Like there's good programs out there that not only could help you build some muscle by themselves, but will also just really facilitate joint health and range of motion that's going to enable you to do better, more effective hypertrophy training. So you've got a lot of variety there. If you, for whatever reason, you decide you want to do a bunch of cardio, there's programs that can help you combine all that with, running insane distances or whatever. And, plenty more beside. You want to do a handstand programs on there. You want to learn to do the splits. There's split programs on there. Anyway, it's a good investment if you happen to have the money. You just want to increase your library of potential training programs. But I won't belabor the point anymore. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. And by the way, if you haven't picked up my book, it's on it's 45% off right now. Just go ahead and pick that up if you haven't. But yeah, I'm not going to belabor the sales anymore. Hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving if you live in the United States, and I hope you had a good Thursday if you didn't. And see you guys next time.